Good Shabbos. I hope everybody had a lovely Thanksgiving, that you, slept well after your tryptophan, that you got to relax and have a nice time with your family. You know, we can't change our family. I haven't spent Thanksgiving with my parents in quite some time. The last time we did, I believe, actually I know, was right before they sold the house that we grew up in, that inevitable downsizing kind of thing that parents do when everybody's been out of the house for a while. And, hopefully you'll get to meet my dad, who has a voice lower than Darth Vader. I'm not actually exaggerating. That's legitimately what he sounds like. And when you're a little child and you hear the word Benjamin from that low a register, it puts the fear of God or Dad in you. I get also to relive those moments all the time. I remember I don't know what we were doing, but I was with my son, my middle child, and he was getting into stuff. He was just, playing with whatever it was. And I looked at him and I said, "Why do you have to touch everything? Oh my God, I'm my dad talking to myself." Literally, the words were not even fully out of my mouth when I realized this was the same conversation that has been going on in our family for generations. This week's Parsha starts with fathers and sons, starts with parents and children. The first Parshat Vayeshev, because the word Vayeshev appears in the first verse, the first pasuk, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv. And Yaakov dwelled in the land of his father's travels, the land of Canaan. One of my favorite commentators, the Kedushat Levi, explains why it is that Isaac is invoked in Jacob's travels. He says it's because Jacob, after wandering for so long, after having so many different business dealings, had finally been able to live his life based on the ethics of his father. He'd finally been able to learn what it means to live an honest life from the Pirkei Avot, from the ethics of his father. The Kedushat Levi says, just as Yitzchak demonstrated his love and fear of heaven, Yaakov would take this love and fear of heaven with him wherever he went. And Yaakov would be an honor to God and to himself. And so he carried his father's traditions. He carried on his parents' traditions. And the next verse we have, who's born? Yeah, that's right, Joseph. So just like those parents carrying on the good traditions, we now have favoritism coming back, right? Just as Yitzchak favored Esav, or Isaac favored Esav, and Rebecca, Rivka favored Jacob. Now we have more favoritism, right? The fun and dysfunction. That's our patriarch. Those are our patriarchs. The fun and dysfunction. And it says that he loved Yosef the most because Yosef was the son of his old age. Okay, what does that mean? Well, Rashi, the commentator, says what it means is that of all of his children, and he had quite a few, Yosef most closely resembled him physically. Of all of the children, all of the men who would become 12 tribes, and Dinah, Joseph looked the most like Jacob. Yosef looked the most like Yaakov. Yes, Yosef looked the most like Yaakov, exactly. But here's the thing, in this parsha that's rife with tension between parents and children, we see the favoritism costing Jacob, right? His brothers hated Joseph, and Joseph was sold into slavery. We see sons who deceive their father, just like Jacob deceived his father. We see these sins coming back again and again. The sins of the parents meted out on the children again, and the cycle playing itself out again. Right, when we grow up, whatever we grow up in, after a while, we don't think of it as functional or dysfunctional. We just think of it as familiar. So if we grew up not getting enough love and needing love or feeling unloved or feeling worthless, we have to really try, or else we're going to repeat the same patterns over and over again to our children. But in this parsha of betrayal and deception, we see the end of the cycle. So Joseph looks a lot like his father, and he's set up to be just like him. He leaves his own father. Like Jacob left Isaac, Joseph leaves Jacob. I can write you a flow chart if all these names are confusing. We're told that the amount of time, the 22 years he spends apart from his father, is the exact same that his father spent away from his grandfather. But Joseph undoes the favoritism. Whereas every parent before him clearly favors one child over the other, typically the firstborn over the second, what do we see from Joseph? We see this. We see Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, treated equally. We see the destruction, the breaking of those patterns. And we're told that wherever Joseph goes, the presence of God is with him. He flourishes wherever he goes. He's sold into slavery, and the next thing we know, he's in Potiphar's house, and he's the head of the household. Right? I've left you nothing. You are second in command to my house. But he faces temptation. Potiphar's wife, right? We read that trope where he goes back and forth. He vacillates. And Yosef is unique because Yosef is the first Bnei Yisrael, the first son of Israel. Avraham was the first Jew who recognized God, but he wasn't an Israelite like we are. Joseph is. And like Joseph, he's the first, and like that, Joseph is the first person in the Torah referred to as an Israelite, or whatever the term is, to define somebody who lives in a society that is not the Jewish environment. Joseph is the first person to live in the diaspora. While his father and grandfather traveled and left the Holy Land, Joseph doesn't merely travel, he settles and becomes a citizen and a dignitary in the land of Egypt. So he comes to this, before that, he comes to this moment of temptation with Potiphar's wife, and he is tempted. He's not sure. He vacillates. That trope we heard, he goes back and forth. So what kept him from sinning? We're told that as he was making his decision, he saw himself in the mirror. And based on everything we know about what we talked about, who does Joseph look like? His father. So when he saw himself in the mirror as he was about to sin, he was reminded to stay on the right path. He was reminded what to do, to follow, just as his father was learning to follow Isaac's heavenly way, Joseph knew he had to stay on the straight and narrow. All of us, every single one of us here is Joseph, faced with these choices of how we settle in this diaspora. We're settled in this new land and we are comfortable. We are citizens in every way, shape, or form, thankfully. This land that gives us Thanksgiving has given us, the Jews, more freedom than any land we've ever known. And we are constantly, like Joseph, battling temptation. So what keeps us from straying? What keeps us from going down the wrong path? Memory is not enough. Memory of our ancestors, of our parents, looking in the mirror, and I've been told a million times I look just like my father, but a little better looking. At least that's what he would say. He's better looking. But memory's not enough. Memory can't keep us from it. Because Judaism is not about memory. It's not about the past. It's about the present. We read and we said the blessing over and over, Notein HaTorah, that God not gave, but gives the Torah. That Judaism is present tense. That we are still fulfilling the Jewish vision. So Judaism is not about the past, it's about the present and the future. When God decides to give the Torah to the world, we're told by the rabbis that God asks the Jewish people, God is, in this case, very Jewish. He's making a business deal. And he's saying, who's going to be your guarantors? Who's going to guarantee me that you keep the Torah? And the Israelites say in this midrash, our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God says, no, that's not enough. And they come back and say, we will keep the Torah. And God says, no, that's not enough. So the guarantors of the Torah are not our parents. They're not us. They're our children. It's not memory that keeps us from straying. It's not the past. It's the future. It's deciding what we want this Jewish world to look like. My Darth Vader father, whom I love dearly, does not keep me Jewish. My parents do not keep me Jewish. My children do. My children keep me faithful. My faith in the future of standing up against the status quo, of standing up against things that are known in our world that we know better. Judaism has always been about challenging the status quo, about going against the grain. In just a couple of days, we're going to celebrate a holiday where we fought against worshiping beauty, glorifying physical pleasure. The Hellenists, right? You know that holiday. I'm not going to sing I Had a Little Dreidel. Things haven't changed that much. We still have a status quo to challenge, and we still have a future to look forward to. And the question is, will we be that miracle that we celebrate for our children? Shabbat Shalom.